Konbanwa. Pat Tokuyama here. Long time no see. Let me just make sure that the chat is going to be up and running and we can go ahead and get started. Let me know where you guys are watching from if this is your first time here. Also say hello in the comments section. Give me a thumbs up if you guys can hear me, or show me some of the little heart signs, whichever works for you. And today I have a bunch of different things that we're going to be making, and we're actually not going to be doing Japanese food. We're going to just be doing some fun things with some whole grains, including oats as well as some whole wheat, and we're going to be making some cake as well as bread and some black lentils, which if you've never had these before, they're quite delicious. And we're also going to be talking about sourdough starter. If you guys are into baking, now that you're probably at home a little bit more than you usually are, those are some of the things that I have planned today. Let's get my backup recordings going. Actually, can't get that one. So let me go ahead and get that started. Let me know what you guys think if you have been baking at all, and what you've been baking, if you've been baking. I'd be curious to know. Some of the things that we're going to be making today are pretty simple, and even though they're simple, they taste really good. So the first thing that I wanted to just show you was my little oat flaker. If you guys have seen this before on my YouTube channel, this is something that I use to make oatmeal as well as porridge using whole grains, and it's super delicious. So maybe you have had difficulty finding certain ingredients the past few weeks because of the current COVID situation, and one of the things that I've, I guess, been fortunate is because I've been baking and using whole grains, it hasn't been too much of a problem for me, but I know that I've had trouble getting some simple things like butter or chicken or dairy in general. And I don't know about you guys, let me know in the comments if you guys have had issues getting any of your ingredients, any of your foods. I'd be curious. And first thing that we're going to do is roll some oats. And we're going to be making some granola. This recipe is actually on my website, alldayieat.com. If you want to just search granola, you can find it there. And yeah, plant-based cooking with me. And we're going to be doing some sort of a, I guess, a melange of different dishes or foods today. So that's kind of what I have planned for you guys. And oops, got my cameras mixed up there. We're going to be starting first with the granola using freshly rolled oats. So here is a bag of oats. If you've never seen these close up, I'll show you what they look like. They kind of look like whole grains, if you've never seen these before. So you can actually toast them if you wanted to, make them a little bit more roasty, more nutty, if that's what you like. But since we're going to be baking them in the oven, there's no point. But usually if I'm making oatmeal with it, that's something that I do. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn this on. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second. But we're going to be doing a pretty standard recipe of 4 cups of rolled oats to about a ½ cup of sugar and about a ½ cup of olive oil. You can actually throw in about a tablespoon of cinnamon in there as well if you like things spicy. I'm going to use about a ½ cup of nuts, and I'm going to throw in some chia seeds as well for some additional texture, and ½ cup of brown sugar. And I think for today we're going to just keep it pretty simple. You can actually use maple syrup as well, honey, if you want things a little bit on the sticky side. I don't really like my granola sticky, so I don't use honey that often, but just a few ideas for you. And let me just pause this. I'll show you how the rolled oats look close up. So that's how they look right there. So just like you would get in a bag of rolled oats or container of rolled oats at the supermarket, only these are very fresh because we just rolled them, so they haven't oxidized, and they have a lot more flavor than the kind that you get at the supermarket. So that's one of the reasons why I started to roll my own oats, was so that I can have freshly tasting oats, because I eat oatmeal pretty regularly, each week at least, once a week, as well as granola. And this stuff's great. All you need is a oat flaker. You can actually get a manual one if you want to do it by hand, if you're into doing that kind of work, or you can get an electric one like this one, the Como. So we're going to do about 4 cups. We need a little bit more than that. And then we're just going to use my stand mixer here, and we're just going to evenly mix everything together, and then we're going to put it onto a baking sheet and bake it for about 40 minutes. So put in a little bit there. Do you guys have any tips for granola? What do you guys like to put in it? Let me know in the comments, and maybe I'll make some modifications to mine. So cinnamon, like I mentioned, very important. If you like things spicy, you could also use some cardamom. And if you like things fruity, you can also add in some dried fruit as well. So for the chia seeds, I'm just going to put in about 1/3 of a cup, which is what this little thing is. A little bit less than 1/3 of a cup. Sometimes I put quinoa. Quinoa is another great addition. You can put in seeds, pumpkin seeds, flax seeds, and then for nuts, you can use whatever kind of nuts you enjoy. So I like walnuts the most. Pecans come in at a close second. I'm just going to put in about 1/2 cup to 1/3 of a, or 3/4 cup. And brown sugar. You can use this as well. This is going to be just about, where did my measuring cup go? Depending on how sweet you like your granola, you may want to put a little bit more or even a little bit less, but if you guys know me, I don't really like my foods too sweet. So I just put in about 1/2 cup right there. And we're going to put in about a teaspoon of salt. Salt is important to contrast the flavor, the sweet flavor, with the nutty flavor. It adds depth, so don't forget to put in the salt. Just going to put in about a teaspoon. This is a pretty standard granola recipe if you've never made it from scratch. Super simple. All you got to do is mix everything together and then bake it. And then, because I like to be on the healthier side, we're going to be using, some extra virgin olive oil. And this is going to be our sort of binder. It helps to cook everything, and it gives it a nice texture, and it keeps things a little bit moist. So you got to put in some oil, otherwise it's going to be very dry, even if you're going to be using something like honey or maple syrup. So we're going to see how much this is. This is probably a little less than 4 cups. So if it is, we're going to have to roll some more oats. So there's 1 cup. It's 2 cups. 3 cups. That's just about 4 cups. So that's all that we need. And usually this lasts a few weeks. I store it in a glass container, airtight, and it's delicious by itself with some plant-based milk, soy milk. It's my favorite, along with almond milk. So I'm going to put about a tablespoon of cinnamon in here. It's going to be nice and spicy. Oops, there's that. And we're just going to get things started to mix. And if this is your first time here, let me know where you guys are watching from. I'm going to put in about a 1/2 cup of olive oil right now. So Alright, so there's a half cup. I'm just going to add it in here, and once it's incorporated, we're going to go ahead and spread it out on a baking sheet and bake it until it's nice and gold. I don't know, for some reason comments aren't updating, so hope that gets fixed shortly. Alright, so that's good enough for me. And I actually don't really care about my chunks of brown sugar. Some people might be a little bit more particular about that. But I like chunks of brown sugar in my granola. So here's how it looks right now. So pretty standard. And it's a very healthy way to get started in the morning. So I usually line my baking sheets with some parchment, which makes it really easy to clean up. So here's a baking sheet. And my leftover little roll of parchment here. Time to open a new package. Do you guys use parchment? I used to never use parchment. I used to be all about foil. But parchment's much better. Or I guess it depends on what you're making. Oops. Scissors go in here, not my parchment. Alright. Make sure my beans don't fall over, or my lentils. So, there they go. And if you have two baking sheets, you can certainly spread it out that way. I usually try to fit it all in one sheet, less cleanup. And then if you're going to be adding dried fruit, you should do so towards the very end, once it's done baking, once you take it out. And then I like to put it in when it's nice and warm. I feel like some of the flavor gets absorbed by the granola when you do that. Alright, so here it is. Simple granola with some brown sugar, freshly rolled oats. We're just going to bake this until it gets nice and gold. About 30 minutes. So the next thing that we're going to be doing is making a simple no-knead bread. If you guys have ever done no-knead bread before, that's probably one of the simplest types of bread that you can ever make, because you don't have to knead it. All you have to do is mix everything together, and it's very delicious, especially because it's homemade. Actually, before we even start that, I forgot. I wanted to show you how to do whole grain porridge. So here I have some kamut. So this is a whole grain. It's a type of wheat, and it's one of my favorites. It's very flavorful. If you've never tried kamut before, that's what it looks like. The grains are a little bit longer than regular wheat. Usually wheat is a little bit shorter, if you want to see how that looks up close. And we're actually going to be making some porridge for breakfast tomorrow. So I'm going to do probably about a half cup. And sometimes I use it in my, I cook it in my overnight, or my slow cooker overnight, so that in the morning it's ready for me to eat. And I always toast the grains. I recommend that you toast them for additional flavor. So we're just going to do about a half cup on the stove until they get nice and fragrant, and then we're going to roll them in the same little device. So you can actually make porridge with a lot of different grains. It's not just kamut or oat groats, which is what we just did right now. You can use rye, you can use spelt, You can use, pretty much any whole grain. They all have different flavors. So it'll give you a good idea of what porridge can taste like, especially if you've never really had it before. It's very flavorful. And I totally forgot I was going to toast this, but I already put it in there, so it's okay. The reason why I would toast it first before putting it into the flaker is that if you're going to toast it after you flake it, the little dust and the little particles fly all over the place if you have a gas stove, so you might have noticed that. So that's one of the reasons why I would recommend, if you're going to be making whole grain porridge, that you toast it before flaking it. So, and then this is how it looks. Close up, show you how that looks. Looks almost like, I don't know, coconut flakes, I guess. Thinly cut coconut flakes. So very grainy and nutty. I like the way my freshly cracked grains smell. All right. See if the comments are updating on my phone. Looks like I see Vancouver 2016. Hello, thanks for joining. Oh, there's all the comments. Looks like I see Jenny. Hello, Jenny. Rosa, Silvetta, Donna, Christina, Grace. So Donna's asking, what's the machine doing to the oats? It's rolling them. So there's basically two stainless steel pins or rollers, and it's crushing them. So that's why, if you look closely here, it looks like they've been sort of pulverized, and that's why it's called a roller or a flaker. It rolls the grains or the oats, and it also flakes them. And you can actually adjust the thickness, so depending on if you want like thick oats or very thin oats, the thinner oats actually cook a little bit quicker, so depending on if that's your preference, maybe you can do it thinner. There's a little adjuster thing in here. I have a video review on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. And actually I'll put a link for my YouTube channel right now really quick so you guys can see where you can go to subscribe and get the high definition replay. So alldayeat.com/go/YouTube is where you can go to get the replay for this, and subscribe if you want to see more plant-based Japanese cooking videos. I know today is not Japanese, but nevertheless, that's my focus. So, all right, so now we have this out of the way. This is going to be my breakfast for tomorrow. Like I mentioned, I'm probably just going to do this overnight in my slow cooker. All you do is add a little bit of water, usually about 2 to 3 times as much. You can also use plant-based milk if you want to. Get a little bit of a different flavor. Throw in some cinnamon, throw in some nuts, dried fruit, and then it goes great with fresh fruit or even frozen fruit the next day when it's ready to serve. Maybe even with some honey or syrup, if that's what you prefer. So set this aside right now. And now that we're done with our oat flaker, what I was going to do is show you how my flour mill rolls, or not, doesn't roll, how it mills freshly grain into whole wheat flour. So that's what we're going to be using next for our no-knead bread. And I know sourdough is pretty popular right now. I'd be curious, raise your hand, or I guess give me a thumbs up or leave me a comment if you guys are making sourdough or any kind of bread or baking at all at home. I feel like baking is kind of like therapy, especially if you are kneading the dough and of course eating it also. So this is my grain mill. This is the Mock Mill 200. Also got a review on my YouTube channel if you want to check that out, what it does. Basically you put in the whole grains here and out comes freshly milled flour. So better flavor, better nutrition, better aroma, and that means better food, so better bread, better pizza dough, all that stuff. And pasta too. Anything that you can make with whole grains will taste better. So here we're gonna just do about 2.5 cups. We're actually gonna be using a recipe which is available online. It's Jim Leahy's no-knead whole wheat bread, and you can just Google it. It's pretty straightforward. It's going to be 2¼ cup of bread flour and 3/4 cup of whole wheat flour. So we're not going to be using too much of this, but it's going to help to add a lot of texture and flavor that you otherwise wouldn't have if you were just making a white bread. So I'm just going to put a little bit in here. And I usually measure everything out when I'm making my bread loaves, but this one's pretty foolproof, so if you don't have a scale, don't worry. So there's that. And then it's going to get a little bit noisy, so I'm not going to talk, but you guys can leave any questions or comments below while this mills. All right, so here is the freshly milled dough. And the reason why I did it in such a large bowl was so that we can combine everything together. You can also use your stand mixer if you want, but we're not really kneading it, so you don't need to. And then I actually put this into my bread proofer, which is super useful if you live in a colder environment, because temperature affects how quickly your bread is going to ferment and proof. And yeah, anyways, so now I'm just going to measure out about 3/4 cup, 3/4 cup, sorry. So I'm just going to put it in here. And then we can use actually whatever's left over for our sourdough starter. So this is going to be a yeast-based bread. And if you guys know anything about sourdough, when you're making sourdough, you don't need any yeast. Looks like there's not going to be too much left over. Actually, that was just about 3/4 cup, so we're good. So I'm just going to throw this all back in here. And then I'm going to measure out some bread flour, about 2 cups and 1/4. So this is my bread flour, I think. Yes, this is my bread flour. No, this is my bread flour. That's my all-purpose flour. One time, I was making bread, and I got my containers mixed up, and instead of using my bread flour, I used my masa container. And so I put in cornmeal masa, which is what's used to make tamales and tortillas, into my dough, and I was like, this doesn't feel right. And it was because I put in masa. So do not make that mistake. Make sure that you guys are labeling your containers the way that they should be, so you know what you're using. So this one says bread flour right here. So the only way that I get it confused is if I mislabeled it, but I'm pretty careful about that. So now we just need a 1/4 cup. So there's 1/4 cup of flour there. And then about 1½ teaspoons of salt. I'm going to put a little bit more salt. Salt is very important for your bread. If your bread doesn't taste good, it could be because you didn't put enough salt. So there's 1, 2, 3. 1½ teaspoons. And this is 1/2 teaspoon of yeast. So I'm going to grab some of my active dry yeast. And put the timer on here. So you want to mix your granola about halfway through to make sure that it cooks evenly. So you just put the timer on there for about 20 minutes. And then this is going to be about 1/2 teaspoon. You can put a little bit more because this is a little bit old, so I'm going to just do about 3/4 teaspoon. And then 1 1/3 cup of water. So Get this out of the way. I don't know why my teapot's here, but it's here. Actually going to refill. This is green tea, in case you're wondering. So once we add the water, we're just going to mix everything together and then proof it overnight. So there's 1 cup. And there's 1/3 of a cup. So you can use a dough whisk if you have one of those, this is what those dough whisks look like, or you can just use a spatula, it doesn't really matter. And just as soon as everything is mixed together, just cover it with saran wrap and let it sit and ferment. Oops. Donna says she's afraid to make the sourdough starter and the home is not warm enough to keep it growing. Actually, you don't need a warm home for your sourdough starter. You need a refrigerator, and you can actually probably put it somewhere, maybe like next to your refrigerator, or if you have a TV, somewhere that's radiating heat to ferment it after you feed it. It can probably work. And Grace is asking, did I make my own starter from sourdough? It's actually the other way around. So you have to make starter to make sourdough. And yes, that's the only way that you can make sourdough is with a starter. So you can actually make it from scratch at home if you want. It just needs to be made with some yeast, or depending on the recipe, you can actually just make it with flour and water, and then it'll be made with the yeast that's in the air. Or you can buy it, which is what I did, and I bought some starter from breadtopia.com, which I would recommend if you are into baking. That's where I got a lot of these supplies, and that's what I did. So here is the no-knead bread. This is how the dough looks just as soon as everything is incorporated. That's all you need to do. So I'm just going to cover this, and then we're going to let it ferment. You can let it ferment for 24 hours, so tomorrow around 5 o'clock this time it'll be ready. I recommend at least 18 hours. 12 hours is okay, but the longer you let it go, the more complex and well-rounded the flavor is going to be. Okay, so here's this second dish done. And I'll show you guys how the granola looks right now. So here's the granola. Starting to get a little bit toasty, so I'm just going to stir it up a little bit and let it cook or bake for another 20 minutes-ish, and then it should be done. Make some space here. So as you can see, the no-knead bread was pretty simple. If you guys have made anything like that, let me know in the comments, or if you think you might try it now that you know how to make it, let me know also. So I'm just folding the granola so it's evenly cooking on the bottom and the top. And back in. Okay. So the third thing that we're going to be doing, or the fourth thing, is going to be the sourdough starter maintenance. So this is my little jar of sourdough starter. As you can see, it's not very much. And if you're new to it, what you might be doing is wasting a lot of sourdough starter when you don't necessarily need to. That's what I was doing when I first started. And it adds up quite a bit because you have to keep feeding this every day or every week, depending on where you're storing it. And I started to use or waste a lot of it. So what I did was I cut back on how much that I'm using, or as my maintenance jar. So this here is about a tablespoon. And when you feed your sourdough starter, you're going to feed it about equal parts of water and equal parts of flour. So I do a 50-50 mix of all-purpose and wheat flour. So this is wheat right here. And this is actually something that was in the tartine bread book. So tartine is a famous bakery in San Francisco. If you've never heard of it. There's also a bread baking book if you want to check that out. But that's the sourdough starter that I follow for this. So this is about a tablespoon, roughly 15 to 20 grams, depending on how hydrated it is. And for this, we're just going to add in about 20 grams of flour and 20 grams of water. And maybe on Sunday, we're actually going to use it, and I'll bake a no-knead sourdough bread. So, I'm going to grab my scale. So we're just going to weigh out about 20 grams of water, which is going to be just over a tablespoon. So there's 20, and we're going to do 10 grams of whole wheat, and then 10 grams of bread flour or all-purpose flour. So that's going to be a 50-50, and then just mix everything up. So you're going to get a total of 40 grams. And now that the sourdough starter has been fed, what you're going to be doing is leaving this out at room temperature or somewhere slightly warm between 75 to 85 degrees. And that way it's going to ferment. So as soon as it's mixed like that, just put the lid back on and let it sit. And you'll notice that if you want, you can actually put a little marker for where the sourdough level is right now to where it eventually rises to. And once you're able to double the volume within about 6 to 8 hours-ish, then you'll know that it's just about ready to use. So there's other tricks that you can Better All right, now the sound should be back. Thanks for the tip. So this is going to be ready to go now. And what we're going to do is use my other mixing bowl here, and we're going to combine everything for the meringue, and then separate, we're going to have to clean up that bowl for the cake. So let me know if you guys can hear me now. Okay, so the first thing that we need to do is make the meringue. So we're going to separate the egg whites. So we're going to use 4 eggs and then some lemon juice, along with some vanilla extract, 1 teaspoon, and then a ½ teaspoon of salt. So here is some lemon. We're going to juice this. So that should be about a teaspoon. So we'll set that there. And the eggs. So I usually separate the eggs using the shell. Maybe you guys do this as well. It looks like my stream dropped. All right. Anyways, separate these two. Did it the other way around. All right. So here's our egg whites, and we're going to go ahead and beat these until they form stiff peaks. All right, and then we're going to add in a little bit of the lemon juice. Okay. All right, I should be back now. Looks like there are some network issues. Okay, don't know what happened there, but thanks for your patience. So what I said we were going to be doing is making the meringue right now. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Make some space over here. So that's 4 egg whites, right? And we're going to be putting in about a cup of sugar. So, sugar. And 1 cup of sugar, along with about a teaspoon of, 3/4 of a teaspoon of lemon juice. So if you guys have never made meringue before, you may want to pay attention to the consistency. So right now it's a little bit liquidy. And as you continue to beat the egg whites, it's going to start to form stiff peaks, is what they're called. And that's when you know, or that's when you see the foamy stuff stick up by itself without tipping over. So I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And actually, I think I made a mistake. I think this recipe, we're actually supposed to cook the egg whites on the stove for a little bit, but we'll see if this is going to work. And if it doesn't work, then we know that's what happened, is I made a mistake. So we were supposed to cook this first, but we'll see if it works. Alright, so it's starting to come together. You can see it's a little bit shinier and starting to hold its shape, so you know you're making good progress. So I'm going to check right now to see if the stiff peaks have formed. Doesn't look like it. Not quite. So you can see that they're starting to tip over, so not quite. A little bit longer. Okay. See now how it's doing. So almost there. Maybe a few more seconds, a minute or so. Okay, I think this should be good. Almost. A little bit soft. Just about. You can see that it's standing up. And now if I remember correctly, we're supposed to put in the butter a little bit at a time, and then it's supposed to curdle, which is okay. And that's going to be it for the Swiss meringue buttercream. Hopefully I didn't screw it up because I didn't cook it, but we'll find out shortly. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in here a little bit at a time. Need to scrape down the sides. So if you guys can see in my mixing bowl, some of the butter isn't going down. Go ahead and scrape that down. And by the way, this smells amazing right now. If you guys like frosting, especially butter frosting, you're gonna love this. Looks nice and fluffy. And scrape it down one more time. I think my lentils are done. And then I needed to put in a little bit of salt, so we're going to put about ½ teaspoon. And then our buttercream will be done. So just put a ½ teaspoon. Now let's go ahead and taste this. I'm excited to taste it. Looks like the texture came out, so maybe we'll be okay. Fingers crossed. Actually going to mix it a little bit longer. And then we can go ahead and get started on our cupcakes. All right, super fluffy. Cannot wait to try that. I'm used to very dense frostings. I don't know about you guys. All right, so this is good to go. So now we can go ahead and make our cake batter in here. And this will be our last dish for today. All right, so here's how that looks. That's good. That's really good. All right, so go ahead and set this aside. And this is my favorite part. If you guys bake at home, you guys probably enjoy this too. So let me know what you guys think so far. If you have any questions, any comments, leave them below, and I will take a look shortly. Okay, so here is the final meringue, Swiss meringue. Probably messed it up a little bit because I didn't cook it, but it tastes good. So go ahead and set that there for a second. Get that ready for the cake. Okay, so now we can make our cake. Okay. So here is cake flour. How do I know that this is cake flour? It says cake flour. Okay, so for this recipe, we're going to need, this is going to be for a dozen cupcakes. We're going to need about, what is this, 1 cup of all-purpose flour and 1 cup of cake flour, but we're going to just do, yeah, we can just do that since I have my all-purpose flour out. I'm going to preheat my oven to 325. So this is Rockstar Bakes recipe if you want to check her out again, at Rockstar Bakes. That's her YouTube. Also on Instagram. And we're going to do 50-50 all-purpose and cake flour. So ideally you would sift it. I don't really feel like sifting it. It does make a difference if you're particular about those kinds of things like the texture. I just use a wire mesh strainer when I do that. So there's 50-50, 1 cup of all-purpose and 1 cup of cake flour. And And then this is going to be for the dry ingredients. We're going to need 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder and 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So baking powder, baking soda, and salt. And then the wet ingredients are going to be butter, sugar, eggs, and milk. So baking powder, 1.5 teaspoons. So there's 1, 2, 1.5, not 2. 1 teaspoon of baking soda, and then 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Yep. All right, so those are our dry ingredients. We'll go ahead and mix this together, and then we can do the wet. Okay, so Aaron Deere is asking plant-based, not this particular portion of the video. This one's just regular. Alice is asking, did I didn't heat the egg whites? Nope, I missed that step, and maybe that's why it's not going to come out. But at least it tastes good, so we'll find out. We'll see if it holds. Totally my fault. Were the eggs pasteurized? No. Hopefully I don't get sick. Let's see, so there's that. Brown, the dry ingredients are done. And now we got to do the wet ingredients, which are going to be 1.5 cups of butter, or it's a 1/2 cup of butter. So I need another 1/2. Thought I left it out, but I don't know where it went. Oh, here it is. I had to wait like a week to get butter because everywhere was out of stock. So that's why I'm going to use it to the best of my ability. So here's 1.5 cups right there. And then I need, how many eggs? 3 eggs? 2 eggs. 2 eggs. And about 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and that's going to be about it. Okay, so we're just going to mix everything in here with my immersion whisk. This is one of the handy things about having something like this, is you don't need to necessarily use a bunch of bowls. So I don't remember what was in the video, so forgive me if I'm making this incorrectly, but we're going to cream the butter and the sugar like you would usually do. And this is going to be 1 cup of sugar and 1/2 cup of butter. So where is my measuring cup? So this is a 1/4 cup. We're going to just do about 1, 2, 3, and a little bit less than that. So that's about 1 cup of white sugar. And then we're going to put in the butter. It's nice and soft. All right, and then we're going to add in the eggs as well as the vanilla extract, and then about 1 cup of milk into here, and then we'll be done. there's that. Then we're going to put in the vanilla. I'm going to put in a couple tablespoons, a little bit stronger because I like the vanilla flavor. Actually, I'm going to just do 3 because I really like vanilla. So there's that, and I think that was it. Oh, the egg and the milk. So 1 cup of milk. So we'll just use low-fat milk. I don't even remember the last time I had a vanilla cake. It's been years that I've made one. I've eaten them, but I haven't made one. Okay, so there's that milk. I know this should be at room temperature, but it's cold. Everything else is at room temperature at least. Okay, so I'm just going to gradually add some of this in here, and then I think the last thing is 2 eggs. Turn down the speed because I don't want this to fly everywhere. Okay. So 2 eggs and then we're done. We just got to pour it, transfer it into the pan. I'm going to go ahead and crack them into my little Pyrex. When I don't use eggs, usually when I'm baking I'll use aquafaba. If you guys know aquafaba, that is the bean juice that you get from cooking chickpeas. Or if you're not cooking it, you can get it from a can. It's a great egg substitute, as well as flax seeds, which have been crushed and then added to some water. That'll make another good egg substitute. So maybe you can consider that if you're going to make this with modifications. Alright, so I'm just going to add some of this to make some space. Totally not following the recipe, but I'm sure it'll turn out fine. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, so you just want to mix everything together until it's evenly mixed in. And now we can just transfer it to a cupcake pan. And I know that some people use like a little scooper, including Rockstar Bakes. She uses a little scooper to evenly measure out your cupcake servings, which I don't have, so we'll just have to eyeball it. But if you make cupcakes often, that could be something worth investing in. Just trying to get off all these little bits here. Okay, so lentils are just about done. This is how the onions looked with the spices. Got a little bit burnt on some of those pieces, but it's okay. And then we're just going to add in the black lentils here. Be careful, these lids are hot sometimes, and this one's stuck. So here's how the lentils look by themselves, and we're just going to add it in to the pot. Smells amazing, by the way, if you've never had these. Perfect for a cold spring evening, or for lunch, whichever you prefer. All right, so that's done, and now we just got to put our cupcakes into the pan. Yeah, Alice says she's very curious to see how they turn out. Me too. We'll see. So I used to use silicone cups when I was baking muffins and cupcakes for a little bit. And then I realized that the crust doesn't come out as crunchy as when you're using metal. And so ever since then, I kind of stopped using silicone. I don't know if you guys have experienced that yourselves. I still have them, I just don't use them. They are a little bit easier to clean up because you can throw it in the dishwasher. Obviously you can't throw this cupcake pan in. I mean, you could. Probably wouldn't be a good thing for its longevity. So a healthy dinner followed by super unhealthy yet very delicious dessert. Cannot wait to eat this. It's been a very difficult, busy week for me work-wise. I'm getting some of my baking therapy in. This is going to be amazing. I can already tell. All right, so I think the cupcakes need to be baked at 325 for 20 to 22 minutes. You can use the toothpick test to make sure that they're done when it comes out clean. All right, so that was it. We did a lot today. And just to recap, what did we do? Granola. We did granola. We did some rolled grains for porridge. We also did some no-knead bread with freshly milled flour. Sourdough, we talked a little bit about that, how to maintain your starter. Spiced black lentils for our dinner. And then the vanilla cake with Swiss meringue buttercream. So if you want to see the replay, make sure to check out alldieat.com/go/YouTube. That's where the replay will be. And if you are interested in joining my community on Facebook, that's the link, alldieat.com/go/community, and you can learn a little bit more about plant-based Japanese food. That's where I'm going to be streaming additional live cooking videos in the future, and where you can meet other like-minded people. So thanks guys for joining. I'm going to pause for a little bit and see if you guys have any questions, any feedback for me. I don't know why actually I do know why the live stream cut out. I think this mixer was blocking the signal to my router, which is over there. That's probably why the stream dropped for a little bit. So thanks for coming back if you did. This is my dinner, like I mentioned. along with my rajma, my kidney beans. Good stuff. Yeah, Alice says she's curious how it's going to turn out. Me too. We'll see if it works. I learn something new every day. Mary says she's never heard of cooking the egg whites beforehand, at least meringue. And what does that do to cook them? I think Alice referred to it as, what did you refer to it as, Alice? Bain Marie. So I'm assuming that's like a hot water bath. I'm not sure exactly. That's a good question. This is the first time I'm doing this recipe, like I mentioned. I messed it up too, being my first time. So we'll see. And Murasaki says, too high tech for me. Sorry. I didn't know that this was high tech, but no worries. Is it okay to use soy milk? Yes, it would be okay to use soy milk. Obviously, the flavor is going to be a little bit different. And like I mentioned, I always make substitutes when I'm cooking and baking. And sometimes it turns out okay, sometimes it doesn't. But you'll never know until you try it out yourself. So that's my philosophy. Mayumi, I think maybe you should try it out yourself. Let us know how it goes. Anybody else? All right, well, thank you guys for joining. Hope you enjoyed this little messy cooking, baking. We'll probably do a little bit more this weekend to show you how this is going to turn out tomorrow. So this is the no-knead bread that we did. On Sunday or Monday, we can do a sourdough version of the no-knead. We're using the sourdough starter that we just fed today. So this is going to be nice and smelly, ready to go, nice and bubbly. It smells like sourdough, which may or may not taste good depending on your personal preferences. And I think that's going to be it. So thanks guys for joining. Alice is talking about the warm water bath because it has raw egg whites. Italian meringue is egg whites, and you do pour in hot sugar syrup, so that cooks it. So yeah, this is the Swiss version. I don't really know too much about the Italian version, but thank you for the explanation there, Alice. I know that Rockstar goes into a little bit of the explanation. I think she did on the video, so you might want to check her channel out. Learn something new every day. All right, guys, I think we're going to wrap things up. Thanks for joining. Hope you enjoyed this. I'll give you guys some pictures later on to show you how these turned out. Can't wait to eat my my food, including my bread, and I'll see you guys maybe later this weekend. So, 気をつけてね. Take care. Bye-bye.